Former Vice President Joe Biden was in Rhode Island yesterday campaigning for state Democratic candidates. The former vice president appeared with the Ocean State's governor, along with its entire congressional delegation, all of whom are Democrats. During his speech, Biden got fired up about the Republican tax cut and the effect it's having on health care.
This is this is serious. Over $500 billion cut out of Medicare. Something people have paid for, they rely on, they desperately need. Why are they going after Medicaid as well? Money. And why are they going after the Affordable Care Act to the last bit? Money. It's where the money is. It's the only way they're going to pay for it. These guys are smart enough to vote against it, to try to stop it.
And joining me now from Providence, Rhode Island, is public radio political analyst Scott McKay. Scott, thank you for joining us. Now, you just heard the former VP and possible 2020 challenger there attacking the president's signature piece of legislation. How will President Trump factor into Rhode Island's midterm elections?
Well, he's already been factoring into it quite a bit in both the governor and the Senate race. Rhode Island has its first woman governor. Her name is Gina Raimondo. She's running for re-election against Alan Fung, who's the mayor of Cranston, the second largest city in the state. And so much of her advertising and her negative thrusts at Fung have tried to link him to Donald Trump. And yet, you know, the president really doesn't have an awful lot to do with state issues. But in a blue state like Rhode Island, where the latest polling that we really trust shows that more than 50% of the people here believe that the president has an unfavorable job approval rating. So the Democrats are doing the best they can to nationalize this race. The Republicans want to talk more about state issues. And so far, there's also a third candidate in the race, a kind of bombastic former conservative state representative named Joe Trillo from the Providence suburb of Warwick. He was actually Donald Trump's campaign chairman in Rhode Island last time. So he is jumping on the Trump bandwagon as much as he can.
So as you mentioned the polling, and the latest polling from our Providence affiliate shows that Raimondo has brought her lead up to 7 points. What issues is Fung focusing on in his upset bid to try and to mess that up?
Right now, Fung's biggest problem is this third party, this independent fellow, Mr. Trillo, because what he's doing is really pushing the conservatives to reject Alan Fung, saying he's too moderate. He's not a real Trump Republican. But what the governor's doing basically is pushing back against Fung, saying he hasn't done a very good job as mayor of Cranston, saying that he had they had a ticket scandal that was not a huge scandal, but it reflected badly on the police department, and Fung had to make some changes there. But the big thing is, as is the case around the country and around New England, Massachusetts, our next door neighbor here, is really leading the region in an improving economy. But Governor Raimondo is doing the best she can with her earned media and her paid media to try to take advantage of the fact that the unemployment rate here is the lowest it's been in about 20 years. Right. Now,
one of the more unusual issues in this race is an attack from Raimondo about exploding toilets. You just mentioned the ticket scandal with Alan Fung, but what is this exploding toilets all about?
Well, what she's trying to do is say that Fung hasn't paid enough attention to infrastructure, to particularly in the schools where they've had some leaky roofs. This is a problem all over the state, though. It's even worse in Providence, where because of the recession and the reluctance to raise taxes on the part of our legislature here, a lot of work on both roads, but especially on schools and public buildings, has simply been delayed. So we've neglected these buildings for quite a while. And so what you're seeing is, the obvious things that happen when you don't pay attention to infrastructure.
So, Scott, tell us a little bit about.
I mean, nobody's dropping cherry bombs in toilets in Cranston. I can tell you that.
That's good. That's good. So, Scott, tell us a little bit about what's important to the voters of Rhode Island. For those of us, it's a small who don't live in Rhode Island. It's a small state. We might not know so much about the immediate concerns of the citizens there. What are the hot button issues right now?
Well, there's a big issue here with the environment. We are the ocean state. Things like offshore drilling are a real problem here for the Trump administration. People fear we spend billions in taxpayer dollars, both state and federal, cleaning up Narragansett Bay from the years when we had a big jewelry industry and textile industry here. So the environment's always a concern. I'd say that's true all over New England. The economy and jobs here are also income inequality. While we have low unemployment, we're not getting huge increases in workers' pay. And so that's a problem. That family with mom and dad working, maybe say making $100,000 a year with a couple of kids, it's hard for them to send their kids to college, they feel. It's hard for them to pay their taxes. And so those issues are really paramount. Also, immigration is an issue among some older Rhode Islanders, and Joe Trillo, the independent candidate, has been trying to make that a big deal. Others issues that surround that are, for instance, should undocumented folks be allowed to get state driver's licenses? The governor came out for that originally, and then she kind of backed away from it because there was an outcry.
Now, Scott, Rhode Island Democratic and Senate Judiciary Committee member Sheldon Whitehouse was on 60 Minutes last night talking about the Brett Kavanaugh hearing. A lot of Democrats and people sort of in that camp think that he did a pretty good job during that hearing. I want to play a clip from his interview.
We're not just entirely logical people. There are animal spirits in humans, and that's true in senators.
This man is not a monster.
And so when somebody goes into the breach in full-on battle mode, if they're not making a fool of themselves, it's a rallying point. And I think you saw that happen in the room.
To my Republican colleagues,
Lindsey rallied the Republicans.
So how is Whitehouse's role in the hearings playing there in Rhode Island? I mean, it's sort of putting him on the national stage somewhat. And we saw him at the vote on Friday picking apart Kavanaugh's calendar. How are Rhode Islanders receiving his, performance there, if you will?
Well, Tanya, what I think is, and what I hear, is that it's playing like it does somewhat in the rest of the country. You just had some polling, 36, 35, 37%, yes, no. Democrats, the base Democrats, really appreciate what Whitehouse is doing. They think he's trying to, put the brakes on this nomination. That's what they want. However, his opponent, the Republican Bob Flanders, says that Whitehouse has become an embarrassment to the state because of the way he acted during the Kavanaugh hearings. And Republicans and even some independents really don't like this. The interesting thing to me is that Whitehouse's paid media, yesterday when all of us here in New England, of course, are watching the Patriots, play the Miami Dolphins and beat them rather resoundingly, thankfully. The paid media that he has on television is about health care. So what he's doing is he's trying to go after more bread and butter issues in his commercials, his ads. He's really upset about the Trump administration and a bunch of Republican attorney generals trying to end the pre-existing care provisions of the ACA or Obamacare. So it's rather interesting that he's taking a two-track thing here. He's playing to the base and opposing Kavanaugh, but again, in his campaign and his paid media, he's underscoring other issues, the more bread and butter issues of health care and a growing economy that, people really care about more than just the partisans on both sides in this Kavanaugh, what we call a frittata here in Rhode Island.
Right. It's interesting that it's playing out there in Rhode Island. It seems exactly the same as on the national stage. But he's solid, correct? His seat is not in any danger.
His numbers are very good. His fundraising is solid. The last poll showed him up by about 20 points. It had It had a margin of error of around 5. But you can see the fact that the National Republican Party hasn't dumped any big money in here to help Flanders out, that they don't think they have a candidate who's going to win in this very cobalt blue state.
All right, Scott McKay of Rhode Island Public Radio. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here. Have a good day.